Okay, everyone, continuing on with male anatomy and physiology. Now moving into the tubes and glands. So we're going to be talking about the internal reproductive structures of the male that are not found in the scrotum, otherwise known as the journey to the penis. Sorry that this doesn't show up quite right. Right. So as we look at our basic male anatomy diagram, we can of course see the penis, and you can see the urethra, the urine tube traveling through it. That opening of the urethra at the tip of the glans penis is called the urethral meatus. You might remember meatus is that weird word that we use to describe the opening. You can also see the scrotum, of course, and you can see the testicle, and my head is in the way of everything. But so we can see the testicle here, and then that coiled tube that curves around it like a C, the epididymis here, and then leading out from the epididymis is the vas deferens. So this is this tube that's going to take the sperm up out of the scrotum into the body and back behind the bladder. This is the same diagram, it's just a different version of it, a little bit more detailed. So I want to take advantage of this opportunity to show you some of the penile structures we learned last time. So you might remember the 3 columns. So the 2 columns on the top surface of the penis are the corpora cavernosum, and then on the bottom surface or underside of the penis, we have the corpus spongiosum, and the urethra travels through that corpus spongiosum. You can also see here the prepuce or the foreskin, right? Okay, so again, we can see the testicle, the epididymis coiled around it right here. There's our epididymis. And then leading up out of the scrotum is the vas deferens. A reminder again that epididymis is where sperm moves to mature and wait for its big day when it gets to get ejaculated, right? That's every sperm's goal in life. And so that vas deferens again, so we have one on each side, right? Because we have 2 testicles, 2 epididymises, epididymi, I'm not sure. And so each one of those has its own vas deferens, which is sometimes called the ductus deferens. So if you see that term, it means the same exact thing. And there's muscle in the walls of these tubes to kind of squeeze and squirt the sperm up and out of the scrotum. So I've kind of highlighted it in blue there, and so you can see it takes up out of the scrotum into the pelvis and back behind that urinary bladder. So let me just highlight the urinary bladder for you in some yellow. So this whole thing, I don't know if you can see that, is the urinary bladder. Okay, so now let's talk about the glands, and I want to get a few things kind of straight before we go into it. The first is that the glands themselves are off to the side of the tubes, and they're going to squirt fluid into the tubes, and the tubes are where the sperm is traveling. So the sperm itself don't travel through the gland. So it's kind of like this slip and slide, this rural version of a slip and slide that you can see here. So the duct or the tube is what the sperm is traveling through, denoted by the little girl here. And then the gland is just squirting fluid into the tube. So just remember, the sperm don't go through the glands themselves. The glands are off to the side, squirting fluid into the tube where the sperm are located. So the first set of glands we're going to encounter are the seminal vesicles. So our sperm is coming up out of the scrotum through the vas deferens, which is going to travel into the pelvis back behind the bladder. And on the posterior surface or the back side of the bladder, we are going to find 2 seminal vesicles, one on each side. So I'm going to circle it. Oh, let me change that to yellow so it shows up a little bit better. So here's one seminal vesicle here. Here's the other one on the other side. Here's the vas deferens coming along, right? And so the seminal vesicles are going to squirt fluid into the vas deferens. Now, as the sperm then is leaving this area, there we give the tube a different name just to make things confusing, apparently. We call it the ejaculatory duct, which is this little length of tube here that is leaving that area where the seminal vesicle is. So you take the vas deferens to get into that region, the seminal vesicles squirt fluid into the tube, and then we call it the ejaculatory duct. So the fluid secreted by the seminal vesicles, which I think I have, yeah. So there's the seminal vesicle. This is a side view or a sagittal view sitting back behind the bladder. And you can see the vas deferens here is traveling here back behind the bladder. Seminal vesicle is going to squirt fluid into the tube that has a high pH. It's alkaline or basic. And that's really important because it's going to counteract the acidity of the vagina. The vagina is actually a very acidic region, and it will kill the sperm because it's so acidic. So we want to kind of give them a buffer. We want to give them kind of a high pH fluid. Now, it's not the highest ever. It's about 8 to 8.5. And you may remember from basic chemistry or biology courses that alkaline or basic fluids have a little bit of a soapy taste. So if you've ever appreciated that semen has a little bit of a soapy taste to it, that's why. It's because it has that higher pH. So that's going to help protect the sperm from the acidity of the vagina. The seminal vesicles are also, that fluid that they secrete is also going to be high in fructose, which is a sugar. And the sperm are going to use that. The mitochondria in their midpiece is going to turn that sugar into ATP or energy to swim. So it's basically food for the sperm. And then there are also going to be some prostaglandins. Prostaglandins are these chemical molecules that can cause contractions in the female reproductive system. And there's some idea to suggest that maybe that helps kind of suck the sperm up into the female reproductive tract. It hasn't been really proven, but anyway, that's there. So that's what the seminal vesicles are going to do. So for sure, the really important things are it's an alkaline fluid that contains a sugar for the sperm to eat to fuel their swimming. So we're going to leave this area again through the ejaculatory ducts, one on each side. And then those ejaculatory ducts are going to come together into the urethra. So I'm going to outline this for you on this diagram. So you can see here's an ejaculatory duct, and then it drains, and the other one drains into the urethra itself, right? So we have two ducts each coming together and draining into this urethra that then travels through the prostate gland. So unlike the seminal vesicles, which there were two of, the prostate gland, there's only one. It's a single gland, and it surrounds the urethra, almost kind of like a donut, with the urethra going through the middle of it. Let's take a look at a side view or sagittal view. So here it is again. I think I have an animation. Yeah. So there's the prostate gland, and you can see we have got our ejaculatory duct coming in here. We also have, because this is the urinary bladder up here, we also have the urethra coming down. So the ejaculatory ducts, when they come together, they're actually going to join a urethra that was already coming through. So the prostate gland is this entire thing here surrounding the urethra, and it's going to secrete fluid as well. Its fluid also has a high pH to help, again, buffering the acidity of the vagina, and it also has a fluid in it, a chemical in it, excuse me, that activates the sperm and makes them swim harder. It's like, okay, really, now is the time to go for it, right? Because the prostate and the seminal vesicles actually aren't going to secrete their fluids until it is the main event. So until we're kind of getting ready for ejaculation. So it's go time for the sperm. Finally, we have a third set of glands called the bulbourethral glands. And so if here's the prostate on the lower left, I'm going to outline, there's the prostate gland. So the sperm are now traveling through the urethra here. And then there's this little tiny gland that I'm going to circle off to the side. There's two of them. I'm going to switch to green. Maybe that'll show up better. There's two of them off to the side, and they're going to secrete a really mucousy fluid into the urethra. And this is going to help clear out the urethra and lubricate it and make it nice and slippery. So I kind of think of the bulbourethral glands, it's almost like a Zamboni, right? Making everything nice and smooth and slippery, like on an ice skating rink. Or kind of the slip and slide example works pretty well. And the interesting thing about the bulbourethral glands is, although they are the last ones that we are talking about, because as you kind of go that journey of the sperm, it's the last place we come to, they actually are going to secrete their fluid first before the seminal vesicles and the prostate gland. And the reason is the function of this fluid is to clear out the urethra of any little bits of urine or anything that was left over and make it nice, smooth, and slippery so that when the fluid and the sperm from the other guys comes along, it just can shoot right out through the urethra. So this is pre-ejaculate. It's the fluid from the bulbourethral glands. You may know it as pre-cum, right? So a little bit of fluid that is actually secreted and comes out of the penis before the ejaculation itself occurs. So that's the bulbourethral glands. Oh, there we go. Animation. All right, so I've been talking about sperm and I've been talking about fluids from these glands. When you put those things together, that is semen. So semen is the combination of the fluids from the seminal vesicles and the prostate gland and anything that's kind of left over from the bulbourethral glands that gets picked up, and the sperm, right, as it all comes out of the penis. So it is a fluid that has high pH to help protect the sperm from the acidity of the vagina, and has some sugar in it to help fuel the sperm for their swimming. So that's why semen has a slightly soapy taste because it's alkaline, and a slightly sweet taste because there's fructose in it. Of course, it can also have different tastes sometimes depending on what the person has been eating. So that can vary a little bit. Some of those compounds can end up in semen as well. So in summary, the path of the sperm, right? So they're created in the seminiferous tubules in the testes. They move to the epididymis for storage to await their big day. Then when the moment comes, they're going to move through the vas deferens, that tube that takes them up, and back into the pelvis and behind the bladder, where they're then going to first encounter fluid from the seminal vesicles. Then they're going to go through the ejaculatory duct into the urethra, where it's kind of in the prostate gland. They're going to get fluid from the prostate gland, then come down through there, and there will already have been fluid, that mucousy fluid from the bulbourethral glands, and then it's going to go out the urethra in the penis and out of the body through that urethral meatus. So that's the path of the sperm. And just remember that the glands each make their own unique contribution. So the seminal vesicles have alkaline or high pH fluid that also has fructose. Prostate gland, high pH, also activates the sperm and makes them swim harder. And remember, the bulbourethral glands is that slippery mucousy fluid. That's your pre-ejaculate. They're actually going to secrete before everybody else, just by a few moments, but before everybody else. So that's it for 5D.